Greetings, Gilliam the Rogue here, once again, back with an Elder Scrolls Online Let's Talk segment. Today we'll be talking about the final skill line for Nightblade's Siphoning. This is a pretty cool skill line, dealing a lot with, as the name implies, siphoning. It's going to be stealing a lot of life, resources, dealing with drains, that sort of stuff. So the more Magicka Nightblade playstyle, the caster-esque sort of thing, dealing with the dark arts, or as I'd like to think of it, as blood magic. Blood magic is some of my favorite concepts in RPGs in general, and this is the closest thing we have to it in ESO. And while it doesn't sate my appetite for cool, delicious, powerful blood magic, it's still really, really great, and it brings a lot of utility to the table, especially for Magicka Nightblades. It's going to be their source of their AoE and single target spammable. They're going to be really cheap, great. There's going to be tons of healing in this skill line too, so you can kind of perform as a pseudo damage, pseudo healer. You're going to be a hybrid build, which usually doesn't work too well, except with the Magicka Nightblade. In 4-man content primarily, not so much in Trials, we can do a lot of damage and healing at the same time, and this skill line brings that playstyle to life. So it's a really cool hybrid sort of gameplay element. It's not going to boast insane DPS. It's why the Nightblade isn't really super crazy in terms of damage production for Magicka, but it's because they have tons of healing, because this skill line delivers a lot to that regard. So let's kick things right off with our passive abilities. And our first passive ability is one of the most simplistic but powerful passives in the game, and that is Catalyst. After drinking a potion, we gain 20 ultimate, no matter what. It's really, really great. I often talk about carrying junk potions, as I call them, around with me to utilize this passive. And what I mean by junk potions are things that drop off of mobs or entities in like dungeons or overland content, stuff that you find doesn't really restore that much. Like if we compare, it's only 6,000 stamina versus a crafted, which is 7.5k, so it gives less, the durations that it provides are lesser, but it still counts as a potion, right? So we're going to get that 20 ultimate. So I'll be chugging these things down in between fights, even outside of combat, because I want to refill my ultimate gauge as fast as possible so that I can be dropping super powerful ultimates. So usually what you want to do is cast an ultimate and immediately drink a potion after. So let's say I'm on my caster Nightblade and I'm getting ready to pull a boss. I already have major sorcery enabled by like Molten Armaments or something in the group, so I don't have to worry about having my potion enabled before I go in. So what I can do is I can drop my meteor, line up a heavy attack, drink a potion, get tons of burst, get tons of ultimate back, and then it makes sure all my buffs are running. Same thing can happen with Stamina Nightblade, kind of drop a Dawnbreaker as I'm slamming down, I can drink a potion. But yeah, Catalyst really, really strong, amazing passive, tons of utilization out of this. It's why Nightblades boast the highest ultimate generation in the game when paired with Soul Harvest especially, and one of our other passives, which I'll get to in a bit. But now let's move on to our next passive, which is Magicka Flood. This is the source of the 8% max Magicka bonus that the Nightblades will have access to. Sorks have it on their Bound Armor skill. I don't remember the exact name of it, but Bound Aegis, I believe. They get 8% max Magicka while slotted. However, passively for the Nightblade, we're going to get this. We don't have to double bar anything. We're just going to get this for free, but we're only going to get that 8% magic out of it. So like a Sork with Bound Aegis, they're going to get 2% weapon and spell damage for slotting. They're going to get minor resistances. They're going to get a little bit more out of it, so it's kind of more powerful for them. But for us, hey, we don't have to worry about sacrificing 2 whole ability slots, and we still get that 8% max Magicka. So it's a really, really powerful thing. Magicka Wardens have it in form of Northern Storm. It's like a passive slot on their front bar, or at whatever ultimate slot that is on, they get 8% max Magicka. So it's not a unique source of Magicka gains, but it's not every class has it. Dragonites and Templars will not. So it's kind of cool that we have access to that. And it's going to be one of the big reasons why we have some of the highest Magicka pools in the game, is because of this passive. So really, really strong. I would love to see this also apply to stamina. Probably not 8%, because that might be a little bit too generous. I think about 5%. Or maybe kind of following the Shadow skill line, what I'd like to see is just giving health, magicka, and stamina. Maybe if magicka flood was just like stat flood or power flood or something of the sort, where it gave 5% max health, magicka, and stamina, or something of the sort, but also required you to slot a siphoning ability so that there was kind of some pull and tug. Because while passives are cool, not having any thoughtful interaction with them and build emphasis is kind of defeats the purpose of ESO. You should have the freedom to specialize and engage with a lot of passives so that you can make special builds instead of just being like, hey, free stats, I'm super powerful, haha. So I'd like to see more power come to the passive, but also at that pull and tug of like, hey, you need to slot a siphoning ability to make utilization out of this. But now next we have Soul Siphoner, a relatively straightforward and rather lackluster passive in my opinion, and that is Soul Siphoner. And what this is going to do is it's just going to increase our healing done for each siphoning ability we have slotted by 3%. So as we see, 15% with that, and then it goes to 18% when I have all of my slots. So all 5 active abilities and then ultimate 18% bonus healing done. This will apply to any healing we do to ourselves, so it's really strong for self-play, as well as healing our allies. So this kind of fits into the healer Nightblade role. Now, this will apply to all skills. It doesn't only apply to siphoning skills. So, like, let's say I'm using Refreshing Shadows or Refreshing Path from the Shadow skill line. That healing from Soul Siphoner will apply to that. So that is a really nice advantage. But at the same time, 3% bonus healing per ability slotted. We're usually going to only have 1, maybe 2 siphoning abilities slotted per bar. So like on my Nightblade healer, we're going to be using a Morph of Strife and then definitely a Morph of Drain Power. And then on our back bar, we'll probably be using a Siphoning Strikes morph. So I only have 6% bonus healing done, and that's kind of whatever, right? It's not going to be the make or break in terms of me keeping my group alive or anything, so it's not going to bring anything super meaningful to the table, but it does provide a little bit of extra padding so you can focus more on regen instead of having to stack into pure healing sources like magicka and spell damage. You can kind of get away with losing out on raw power because you're going to make up a little bit from the Soul Siphoner passive. But again, not going to bring anything crazy to the table. It's not a very unique, interesting passive. It's just kind of just, hey, free healing. So, yeah, whatever. Not too fond of this skill. Not really sure what I would even like to see done. I would probably... Actually, I think it'd be pretty cool if we fit into the whole siphoning feel of the Nightblade with, like, siphoning strikes and all that stuff, and made this increase, like, drains or something. So, like, anytime we use... siphoning strikes or like activate shards, or anytime we get resource return, if we got 3% more resources from that resource return per siphoning ability slotted, I think that would be really cool in helping the Nightblade be able to sustain a little bit more compared to what it used to be able to. Obviously, it will never be what we used to be with the original siphoning attacks, but bringing a little bit more of that power back to the Nightblade to make it kind of stand out like it used to, where it's like, hey, we were the kings of resource management. So giving a little bit back in terms of Soul Siphoner would be a really cool way to help the Nightblade in both PvE and PvP contexts, as well as giving it a little bit more of that original feeling like, hey, you are the master of resource management. So, yeah, but otherwise, in its current state, not that great, but whatever. And our last passive is called Transfer. Every class has an ultimate generation passive or an ultimate reduction passive, and this is the Nightblade's. And all it is whenever we activate a siphoning ability, we gain 2 ultimate. And this has a 4-second ICD, meaning you have to wait 4 seconds in order to get that 2 ultimate again. So, not going to be super crazy. Half an ultimate a second in terms of efficiency. Not all that great, but still adds to the Nightblade's already super high ultimate generation. This isn't going to be great for stamina because we don't really have any great stamina abilities in these. We will have some morphs, but they're not going to do anything tremendously or tremendous. Or if they are decent, we're not going to be casting them every 4 seconds because they're not as spammable. So the only real class or playstyle that gets utilization out of this is Tank, Healer, and Magicka Nightblade, while Stamina Nightblade doesn't really activate this power nearly as frequently, because we only have one skill in here that we're going to be really utilizing, and it has a 20-second duration, so there's no benefit to spam casting. So yeah, transfer kind of in a weird spot for overall Nightblade, but most of the Nightblade playstyles will see tremendous boost out of this, because 2 ultimate every 4 seconds, I mean, that adds up really quick. Like, because over a minute fight, you get 15 ticks out of this, so then you'll be able to get 30 ultimate. So almost half of a soul harvest. Nothing too crazy, but hey, every minute you're in a fight, you're getting 30 ultimate. So like, as longer fights go on, the more you're able to pump out damage or utility. So it's a decent passive, but yeah, again, not going to be really applicable for Stamina Nightblade. But now let's move into our active abilities, and our first active ability is called Strife. This is one of the bread and butter skills of Magicka Nightblades in general. It's one of the first skills that you'll be able to get access to. Even stamina builds will find themselves using this skill early on in the game, because you need to be able to level the Siphoning skill line, and you can't do that without Strife, because it's the only skill that we're going to have access to for a bit. So it's going to have a 28 meters range, so we have tons of flexibility to cast this from a distance. It's going to have a 10-second buff associated with it, which we'll get to in a bit. It costs very, very little Magicka. One of the cheapest spammables in the game. Actually, it is the cheapest spammable in the game. So really, really helping the Nightblade kind of come ahead in the pack in terms of resource management. But again, compared to what we used to be with original siphoning attacks, it's not that great, and it has seen a cost increase. I remember back in the day when this skill costed under 1,000 Magicka. So we've seen some cost increase, but even in Morrowind, it does play a big role in why the Nightblade is a little bit more forgiving to newer players and solo players. So it's a great skill. It's going to deal magic damage upon landing on an opponent, so you need a target up to 28 meters away you can be casting it from. It's going to deal magic damage once it lands. It's a trajectory, so it has that ranged. That means it can be reflected. It's easy to dodge, that sort of stuff. But that magic damage is going to scale with max Magicka, spell damage, spell critical, and spell penetration. Furthermore, when we open up the CP system, since all of that is magic damage, we'll take a look right here. It is going to scale with Elemental Expert, Elfborn, Spell Erosion, and Master at Arms, since it's direct damage. So, relatively straightforward, but upon dealing damage, it's also going to heal us for 31% of the damage it inflicted every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. So that means it's going to give us 5 heals in total. We'll get 1 upon initial hit as well, so pretty strong. It's going to enable tons of self-healing for Magicka Nightblades in solo application. Wonderful skill. And furthermore, that healing done cannot crit. So the way that this works is, since it's based on the damage you do, if your base skill doesn't crit, then the heal will not crit. But if the damage you deal with funnel health crits, then all of your healing will essentially be a crit. However, it cannot crit again, so there's no double stacking. It used to be able to, can't anymore. Big reason why kind of Nightblades in PvP have kind of fallen down the line in terms of what they're able to do. But in terms of PvE, it's still enough healing to get us through a lot of content, but definitely not as strong as it used to be. But that bonus healing that we get out of it is also going to scale with some stuff in CP. So since it's healing done, it's going to scale with Blessed. Since when we do critical hit damage, again, that whenever we crit harder, we're going to get more out of that healing. It's going to scale, that healing will scale with Elemental Expert, again, because remember, it's based on the damage. So the more damage you do, the more healing you get. It's going to scale with Spell Erosion as well, effectively, because if an enemy is mitigating less of that damage, you're doing more damage, you get more healing. So it will still scale with these sorts of nodes in terms of healing, because it's based off of damage. But it's also going to scale with that Blessed node, and since you're also healing yourself, it'll scale with Quick Recovery. So you can get a lot of self-healing out of this skill just alone. So it's a really great way for the Nightblade to stay alive, especially in solo application or in some of the harder content like Maelstrom Arena. Now let's look at our morphs. Our first morph is called Funnel Health. What this is going to do is it's going to add an additional effect where you'll be able to heal yourself and one nearby ally every time you deal damage with this skill. And it has a 15 meters AoE radius, so the ally has to be within 15 meters range of you. If they're out of it, they're not going to get the heal, but if they are, then every time you deal damage with funnel health, that healing that you get will also go to them. So it's a great way to bring self-healing and group healing to the table. And this shines best in 4-man content, so like dungeons or something. And this is going to be the bread and butter of Nightblade healing because it's their way to also deal damage. So they're contributing, helping kill stuff, move quicker, less healing required because you're helping kill shit, and it heals your allies. So it's a great way. It smart targets it means it picks lowest health targets to go to, etc., etc. One thing that I forgot to mention about Strife in general is since that 10-second duration is there, that means if I deal damage here and it does 1339 damage, I'm getting 424 healing every second. So I can cast it again and instantly get healed, but it's going to override that healing. So it's not going to stack. But if I spam cast Strife, it will be able to double proc. It's healing me every time. So if I line up a heal tick with a damage, it's going to be able to get a ×2. Furthermore, if I were to gain damage of some sort, like let's say I crit with this skill and it starts healing me for that crit value, if I cast again and Strife does not crit, my heal over time, even though it will be based off lower damage and effectively making it weaker, it will still refresh. So it's not always advantageous to refresh or recast Strife if you need self-healing. If you get a really big hit, let's say you lined up tons of bursts with like Major Berserk, Minor Berserk, the buff, like Aggressive Warhorn, like that all went off and you got a really big, fat, juicy funnel health crit or something of the sort, and you need that healing to stay alive, don't recast funnel health or you'll lose all of that extra healing. So just because you have the option to recast doesn't mean it's always beneficial, because it is based off the damage and it will refresh. I'd really like to see this skill retain whatever highest damage you dealt. So if you recasted funnel health, instead of refreshing the buff, if it's dealing lower damage, it says, oh hey, you had a stronger heal running, we'll keep that one going for the duration, and once it falls off, then you can get another one. That would help the Nightblade feel a little bit more impactful with staying power in PvE and PvP context, and not really punish overcasting or kind of just using this as a spammable. But again, it's not the end of the world. There's still a very solid class for healing, especially self-healing. It's just a small thing that I like to nitpick at, because hey, everything could be better, right? But yeah, funnel health, great skill. Suggest this to 99% of the players out there. Going to work in PvP if you're in a group, in PvE if you're in a group. However, if you're in solo play, this brings nothing to you because you're not going to have any pets really. Our only pet in this skill line from Shadow that we talked about in the last video does not have health, so you don't need to heal it. So yeah, funnel health isn't going to do you any good. So you're going to take Swallow Soul. And what that does is it retains the original damage of all the same stuff. No AoE healing, nothing of the sort. But while we have the ability slotted, we're going to gain Minor Vitality, increasing our healing received by 8% across the board. So that will apply to all sorts of healing, not just Swallow Soul, not just siphoning abilities, any healing. This is a really great morph for players who love Maelstrom Arena. You get 8% bonus healing from everything. It helps you stay alive. More healing instead of having to use a damage shield. It lets you push for really crazy scores. It's a great ability. I also might suggest this for some tank builds. However, since when I'm tanking, I'm trying to bring utility, I still use funnel health instead of Swallow Soul. But if you're a selfish player and you don't want to rely on your teammates or bring stuff to them because you know that you're capable of going through stuff, you can take Swallow Soul, but keep in mind it is definitely a selfish option. And as a tank, you're trying to bring group utility. So try and bring funnel health if you're playing a Nightblade like the Bloodletter build or a sap tank or something of the sort. Since these all look identical in terms of what they do, I'm not going to really take anything, but we did see relatively simplistic animation. It can be animation canceled. It's very easy to weave. However, there is a long delay with this skill. We notice I have to put my hand out and bring it back in. So If I cast this ability too quickly, I will override my light attacks because it has such a long fluff duration to it that if you don't give it just that little bit of a second in between pressing the button, you're going to miss your light attack. So you have to do funnel health, light attack, wait like just a tiny millisecond, and then do funnel health again instead of just mashing funnel health and trying to light weave in between. Because if you press funnel health too quickly, you're not going to be able to do it. So you have to kind of allow your character to bring back their hand, kind of like wrenching that health out of your target and then shoot off that light attack again. So it is very frustrating to weave. I hope for one day this to be fixed, but we're stuck with it at the moment, and there are definitely ways to get good at utilizing it. But yeah, Strife, amazing skill. Not going to really talk more about it. Next is Agony, one of the probably weakest skills in the game. Almost every class has really long-winded CC that seems an absurdly long time, like 30 seconds or something, but they break upon damage. And every class has a different toolkit in terms of how this operates. So Agony breaks upon any damage. The way that it works is you shackle an enemy in torment, edgy, dark shit, whatever, haha, and you disorient them for 30 seconds. So it's not a true stun. And disorients operate by if the target takes damage, the disorient will break. So since it's a true disorient and doesn't disclose like if any prerequisites or special actions are met, it won't break. That means anytime it deals damage or the target that you've casted this on takes damage, it will break. But if they don't, they're disoriented for 30 seconds. They can CC break it. So in PvE, mobs will do this. In PvP, players will definitely do this because no one wants to be CC'd for 30 seconds. Furthermore, after the 30 seconds has ended, it'll deal a damage over time function with it. It's really, really weak. Like we noticed, Strife does more damage than this if this breaks. So if the target is CC immune, it will do damage. So let's say I cast Agony. Here we can see the animation. He's shackled in torment. It lasts 30 seconds, but he's going to gain CC immunity because I leave combat in just a second. So it's going to end, and he doesn't get anything out of it. So if I recast this here, even though he's CC immune, I'm still getting the damage. So just because targets might be CC immune doesn't mean that skill is completely useless, but in terms of damage over time, it's not that great. But the ability has a 28 meters range, lasts 30 seconds again, disorient, and costs a quite high amount of magicka. Since it's going to have a magicka cost and deal magic damage, it's going to scale with max magicka, spell damage, spell critical, and spell penetration. In the CP system, if we just open that up really quick, it's going to scale with Elemental Expert, Elfborn, Spell Erosion, and Thaumaturge because it's damage over time. So simplistic skill, it's primarily used in PvP to kind of lock players down. It's very frustrating. You can cast this on players on their mount, and the only way they can break it is if they cast it while it's flying to them, or if they dismount while this is on them. If you press H again, you can actually get out of this in some cases. It doesn't happen all the time, so there is some kind of like weird shit going on with it. It's a very frustrating CC. And the other thing is this will ignore many forms of crowd control on players. So let's say I just got stunned or I drank an immovability potion. I can still be afflicted with Agony because it's a disorient and it's not a true CC. So this is a really frustrating tool that Nightblades can make utilization out of against crowd control immune targets. They're like, oh, you just CC broke out of a hard stun? Well, this is a disorient, so I can get you back in it in just a few seconds. So it is a very buggy skill. It's very frustrating to be on the receiving end of, but it can be used quite effectively if you are utilizing it yourself. So it's obnoxious, but it's not any good in PvE. Like most mobs like that are CC immune, like a boss or something, it's just going to deal damage over time. The magicka cost is too high and the damage is too low. But now let's look at our morphs. And our first morph is called Prolonged Suffering, and all this does is it increases the damage over time effect of this ability. So it's going to deal slightly more damage. We see roughly 707 actually, more damage than the base morph, but it's going to take 2 additional seconds after. So how this works is pretty much you cast it on the target after they CC break or it ends, or they are immune to CC, it'll deal damage over time. So it's the same thing as Agony, it's just going to have 2 more seconds of dot time, and it's going to deal a little bit more damage. So still going to scale with all the same stuff, nothing fancy with this. I would love to see this deal way more damage. Give Nightblades an additional damage over time function. And furthermore, I'd love to see if this became a stamina damage over time, because Magicka already has a really powerful one, Cripple, which we'll be getting to in a second. So I think if we gave Prolonged Suffering a utilization to stamina builds and made it its primary function single target damage over time instead of a disorient, it would help the Nightblade a lot in general, and just give it a little bit more flavor from the class instead of using weapon skills all the time. So yeah, that's my suggestion, but otherwise, it's not that great, not going to be utilized too much. But our next morph is called Malefic Wreath, and this is actually going to rework how some of the skill works. Instead of dealing damage over time, what it's going to do is, when this effect ends, it's going to explode for AoE damage. So instead of scaling with Thaumaturs, it'll now scale with Master at Arms, because it's going to be direct damage. It's going to explode in an AoE for a single source of damage. And that damage will increase for 5% by each second that target was disoriented. So you're going to get a lot of damage if someone sat in this disorient for the full 30 seconds. However, when is that going to happen? When is a player going to sit there, unless intentionally, for 30 seconds without CC breaking? Furthermore, a mob in PvE is going to CC break eventually. They're going to be like, all right, I'm sick of this shit, I'm going to CC break. There is no timer on when they decide to do this. It's random. Sometimes I've seen them do it instantly. Sometimes I've seen them take about 6 seconds. So you do have the potential to get more damage out of it, but again, it's direct damage. It's going to scale with Master at Arms, and it's going to be AoE. So it'll have that additional scaling mechanism, but still, it's not going to bring a lot of damage to the table. Disorients are pretty useless for the most part. It's not going to be all that great. In PvP, this is usually the morph that I suggest, because boom, AoE damage, that means it's undodgeable. So if someone CC breaks and dodge rolls after, they're still going to eat this to the face. But again, really high Magicka cost, can only be on one target. All of these can only be on one target, so if you recast it, it'll break on the original. So yeah, really not that great. Would love to see something done to Agony and morphs in general, because they're right now they're just not bringing anything great to the table other than just really obnoxious, kind of abusable in PvP situations. So yeah. But now let's move on to Cripple. Cripple is a strong damage over time function, and it's for Magicka DPS. So Stamina DPS, unfortunately, not going to be able to utilize any of this because there's no morph options for us. Really not that great, but let's talk more about it. So it has a 28 meters range. It's going to require a target. We have a theme here. Almost everything in our kit is 28 meters. That's great. That means we're going to have tons of freedom from a range. It's going to last 8 seconds, so it's going to deal damage over time over those 8 seconds. It costs quite a bit of Magicka. We see same amount as Agony, almost twice as much as Strife, so it's quite pricey, but since it's casted, or the duration is 8 seconds, you're not casting this every second, so not the end of the world. Still, I think that damage over time functions in general, everyone, not just Nightblades, but everyone in the game should see damage over time cost reduction, because right now they're fucking nuts. They cost more than spammables, they can be purged, they can have their damage negated. They need some love right now, because damage over time costs way too much at the moment. But anyways, costs quite a bit. But what we see here is it's going to scale with max Magicka, spell damage, spell critical, and spell penetration, because it deals magic damage. When we open up the CP system, it's going to scale with Elemental Expert, Elfborn, Spell Erosion, and Thaumaturs, because again, damage over time lasts 8 seconds. So it's going to deal damage every 2 seconds. I believe we get 5 total damage ticks once initial hit, and then 4 damage over time ticks, so every 2 seconds. So relatively straightforward, can bring a lot of damage to the table. And furthermore, it's also going to snare the target we apply this on by 40%. So it's a pretty nice snare. It's not going to be anything humongous, but it is strong enough to make an impact, kind of lock those enemies in place, and allow you to control more movement. Furthermore, after you deal damage with this skill, you're also going to gain Major Expedition for the next seconds, granting yourself 30% bonus movement speed. So this is a phenomenal skill that the Nightblade, especially Magic Nightblade, can make utilization out of. It's a great skill in PvE or PvP because it's damage over time. It has a snare on it. It makes you faster. It's a wonderful, wonderful skill. I love this, and it's a big reason why I don't understand why Path of Darkness has Major Expedition on it. I think that skill in general, we talked a little bit about it in Shadow. The Major Expedition is useless because Magicka Nightblades already have Cripple, and there is no Stamina Morph of Path of Darkness. So I really don't understand why we have two major sources of Major Expedition that last the full duration of their skills. This lasts 10 or 11, but you're confined to an area, and this lasts 8, but you have complete freedom. So we have two skills copying what they already do, so I don't see what they... like why they exist. Either give one to stamina DPS, rework it, whatever, do something about it. It doesn't make sense. But yeah, Cripple has a lot. It's a very overloaded skill, but it can only be active on one target, similar to Agony. So if, let's say I cast this on my target dummy here, and then I cast it on here, instead of getting a ×2 tick, we notice, oh hey, he's been purged, and it's only dealing damage to the new target. So that is the one disadvantage of it, but still very powerful, relatively straightforward, has tons of uses. But now let's look at our morphs. Our first morph is called Debilitate, and what this is going to do is it's going to remove that one-person target cap, so you can have this on as many targets as you wish. Keep in mind that still has a very high Magicka cost, so spam casting this on 10 different targets is going to leech all of your Magicka. However, even though it does have that really high cost, if that target dies while this is active, you're going to get half of that Magicka back after it ends. So like, if the target dies within this duration, regardless of whether it's the first tick or the final tick, you get half of the cost that you had spent this with. Keep in mind that if you have cost reduction, you're not going to get 50% of the base, you're going to get 50% of the new cost. So that is one slight disadvantage, but still tons of resource management from this skill. I really suggest it for players who are learning Magicka Nightblade, maybe struggling with Morrowind's resource management, or just resource is in general. Like if you're doing Maelstrom Arena, you're spamming Funnel Health, or you're spamming Healing Ward or something like that. Magicka Sustain sucks, so Debilitate can be a great way to get some of that back while also dealing damage. Still, I really don't understand why this skill exists in its current state, because that Major Expedition, 50% of your Magicka back doesn't make much sense. I think it should give more back, maybe 150%. You should be rewarded for actively killing targets. Otherwise, making it a stamina ability to give stamina some love, because, again, we don't have any single target dots or AoE dots from our class line, so giving a little bit of love to that Stamblade would be phenomenal. And I'm not suggesting all of the suggestions I give go through, but rather some of them. So just giving more ideas to Zos, you can always give them more. They love listening to that sort of stuff. So yeah, just my 2 cents on it. But yeah, Debilitate, great for new players, but most of the times we are going to be using Crippling Grasp. And what this does is it's going to add 2 new mechanics to it. So it's still going to have the same scaling for the damage over time effect. It's still going to have that 40% snare, 30% Major Expedition, and only 1 active at a time. But it's going to have 2 new components. So when it deals damage, I'm going to take this morph. It's going to immobilize the target for 1.5 seconds upon landing. So it's going to lock them in place. They have to dodge roll or wait that 1.5 seconds to get out of it, or use something like forward momentum or shuffle. Otherwise, they're locked in place. They can't move around, but they can still fight and stuff. So it's not hard CC, but it's an immobilization, and it's going to deal a little bit of initial hit damage. So since that initial hit damage is not damage over time, it's going to scale with all of the same stuff, but instead of using Thaumaturge, that initial hit will use Master at Arms, because it is direct damage. Still going to deal magic damage, so Elfborn, Elemental Expert, all that good stuff. So, relatively straightforward. This is usually the morph we will be using in PvE and PvP. The immobilization and direct damage adds some burst. It helps lock our opponents down in place. Just helps keep track of an enemy much better, or lock them in place so that we can get the hell out of there. So I suggest it for PvP. And then in PvE, adding that extra single target DPS is phenomenal. And again, we talked about how the other morph doesn't really have the advantage. It costs way too much magicka. Even though you can cast it on multiple targets, there's no real advantage to it when it's draining that many resources. You're better off just using something like Path of Darkness or something of the sort. So yeah, Crippling Grasp just outperforming Debilitate in most situations except maybe Sustain. But yeah, I'll take this morph, or we already did, to just demonstrate. So I cast it. It has that initial hit we see, and he's immobilized for those 1.5 seconds. That's what the red little swirls around his feet were. It does ignore CC immunity, so there is that advantage to it. The only way to become immune to snares is to dodge roll. You gain a little brief window, or to have forward momentum or shuffle running. So great skill helping lock opponents in place. Now we'll move on to our next skill, and that is Siphoning Strikes. And this has been heavily reworked since Morrowind. And what this is going to do is it's going to operate as a buff. It's going to cost max magicka, but it's not going to scale with anything. And it's going to heal us anytime we deal damage with light or heavy attacks. It will also proc on medium weaving, so I can just demonstrate here. I activate the buff, and anytime I deal damage with a light or heavy attack, I get some healing. So if I just do a medium weave, I'm still going to get the healing, just to just show that. So you have a lot of freedom anytime you're actively weaving, heavy attacking to get resources, whatever, you're getting some healing. This can crit. It's going to use whatever crit is highest, so spell crit or weapon crit based on what your values are, but that's it. In the CP system, it's not going to scale anything with offensively, but it will scale with Blessed, Elfborn, because that deals with healing. So if you crit with it, you're going to get that Elfborn crit, and then with Blessed, it's just applying the healing done, as well as quick recovery, because it is healing. So healing done, you're doing it, scales with Elfborn. Healing received, you are healing yourself, so it scales with quick recovery. So you can get a lot of healing out of this skill, and it was kind of a way to give Nightblades a little bit more tankiness or staying power, while also feeling off that vibe where, like, hey, you're leeching resources or leeching life from the opponent. So that's what it is, Siphoning Strikes. Really nerfed from what it used to be, but that extra healing has helped us quite a bit in terms of solo play and just average survivability. So it is a nice little boon, but in raids and like some of this harder content, healing isn't the issue. It's just that we're so damn squishy. We take a lot of damage. So this isn't really giving us anything in those really high tier, min-max, crazy requirement situations of like pushing for hard modes or getting new scores or anything. So the survivability of this skill isn't going to bring anything to the table there. But in terms of solo play, Maelstrom Arena, Overland content, 4-man dungeons, it's great. So it's going to operate as a buff. You merely cast it as we saw. It's going to last 20 seconds, and then anytime we deal damage with light, medium, or heavy attacks, we get healed. Great. It can crit too, so yeah, wonderful. Now let's look at our morphs. Our first morph is called Leeching Strikes, and this will convert it into a stamina ability. So instead of costing magicka, it'll cost stamina, but it's not going to scale with anything. It's still going to heal the same amount, not going to scale with anything, but furthermore, whenever we deal damage with that light, medium, or heavy attack, we're also going to get 106 stamina back over that 20-second duration. So you can, in total, get 20 light attacks, meaning you're going to get 106 times 20. However, most of the times you're going to need the heavy attack in between. You might miss a weave. So you're never going to get the full value unless you're doing nothing but light attacking over and over and over. Not an optimal way to play, but it is a way to get some healing and resources back. Furthermore, you're also going to get up to 4270 stamina back when this effect ends. And what that means is if you let the full 20-second duration go off, you'll get 4270 stamina back, which is quite a bit. It helps our sustain tremendously. But if you recast the skill, you're also going to get stamina back, but it's only going to be based on how long it ran. So if you let it run for 10 seconds and you recasted it, you're going to get half of that value. So you're kind of going to have to do some really basic math, multiply what that duration uptime was. So if you let it run for 10% of the duration, which was just 2 seconds, then you're going to take 10% times that 4270. You're going to get 427 stamina back after those 2 seconds. So keep that in mind. That means that the skill only needs to run for 5 seconds in order for it to be a stamina gain with minimalistic cost reduction. So if I had stamina cost reduction from jewelry or medium armor, I don't have any of those passives in, it would take even less in order for this to give more stamina. So many times you'll see me casting this ability over and over again in PvP or moving around in PvE because you get a little bit, just a tiny little bit of stamina back if you recast it within that 3 to 6 second duration. You're not going to get nearly as much as you would if you let it build up, but you're not losing anything either in terms of efficiency because it's literally a percent of how long it ran. So it's a great way to get stamina back and make use out of that transfer passive, because every 4 seconds, boom, you activate it, you get 2 ultimate, you get some resources, everyone's happy. But yeah, so really, really rewards active weaving. This has helped Stamina Nightblade and Maelstrom a lot because that bonus healing has helped us. We get tiny little bit of resource management. The resource nerf compared to what it used to be has been completely brutal. I would love to see double or even triple the stamina return for light or heavy attacking, or making heavy attacks give more than light attacks, still increasing that base value, because right now it just gives back so little, and it totally killed the one thing that Nightblade was good at, which was resource management. We've never been the best DPS in the game, unfortunately. We've never really brought anything crazy in terms of utility to the table. So what we had before was Siphoning Strikes, the other morph, which gave Magicka and Stamina back, and it gave us resource management that we had that no one else could compare to. Now that's not there, and we have nothing. The only thing we're really good for is being a buff bitch, is what I call them. You wear Master Architect or War Machine, you throw out Soul Harvest or In-Cap Strike like crazy, and that's pretty much your purpose in a raid. But a Templar can do that while bringing Minor Breach. Yeah, Nightblades need some direction in terms of what we feel like in PvE. Give the class a cause, a purpose, a unique feeling. Resource management is an easy way to do that, especially in Morrowind. A lot of people hate the sustain, but whatever, you're sick of my agenda. Let's get back into the ability. So yeah, stamina, health, get a burst. It's great. Magicka version is called Siphoning Attacks. It's going to do the same stuff. It's going to cost Magicka the same that Siphoning Strikes did. The same thing, except it gives 106 Magicka back when you lighten or heavy attack. Same things apply to Leeching Strikes that we did with Siphoning Attacks. Still, compared to what it used to be, it's garbage. I wish it would get buffed, but yeah, let's move on. Next and last active ability is called Drain Power, and this is going to be an AoE spammable. It's going to have an 8 meters AoE radius, meaning it's going to have quite a large AoE, one of the largest Magicka AoE spammables in the game. So that's really, really helping the Nightblade, Magicka Nightblade, and Tank and Healer Nightblade in terms of AoE and healing potential based on a morph. But it's going to cost max Magicka. It's going to cost the same amount as Cripple, so it's going to be really punishing the spam cast. So if you're doing this, I highly suggest mixing in a heavy attack every once in a while, or utilizing other resource management skills. But what it's going to do is it's going to scale with max Magicka, spell damage, spell critical, and spell penetration. And in the CP system, it's going to scale with Elemental Expert, Elfborn, Spell Erosion, and Master at Arms, because it's direct damage. It only hits once. So all you do is you siphon in the life from around you, you deal damage, it deals magic damage, everyone's happy. Furthermore, if you deal damage to an enemy with this, you will gain Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage by 20% for 20 seconds. This is kind of a conflicting thing because this only scales with Magicka and stuff, so it's a caster ability, but it's giving us Major Brutality. So it's a kind of awkward skill. Doesn't make much sense, but I guess in the sense of draining power, you kind of get fatigued physically, so I guess Brutality makes sense, but whatever. Now let's move on to our morphs. Our first morph is called Power Extraction, and Power Extraction looks really cool, but it's not going to bring anything crazy to the table. It's going to convert it into a stamina ability, so it means that the Stamina Nightblade has a spammable AoE. This does give it a little bit of freedom, so regardless of what weapon type you're using, so if you're two-hand, bow, or dual-wield, you will have access to the skill. So if you're a dual-wield player, not going to be that great. If you're a two-handed player, going to be phenomenal. And if you're a bow player, not going to be that great. But it does give that freedom of anything. It gives that Major Brutality. And instead of dealing magic damage, it'll now deal disease damage. So what that means is it's going to scale with different stuff in CP. It's going to scale with Mighty, Piercing, Precise Strikes, and still Thaumaturge in that system. Furthermore, since it's dealing disease damage, it's going to have a slight chance, 5% because it is direct damage AoE, to proc the diseased status effect, which deals minor damage upon application and applies major defile to the target for 4 seconds. So it is a little bit of added utility, especially in PvP. When you run into a group, you can power extraction, maybe proc some major defiles on those suckers, but there are way more efficient ways of doing it. There are item sets, there is corrupting pollen, there's tons of better ways of AoE major defile, so power extraction not going to bring anything to the table. It's going to deal less damage than acid spray or bombard or steel tornado, so its AoE potential is really lackluster. So I would really love to see this skill get buffed. Either give it a buff, like if you already have major brutality, add something else to it. Maybe just remove major brutality and add something a little bit more dynamic, like hitting additional targets or targets that are weak to disease. Add a little bit of flavor to it. Make me want to run this skill, because right now it's not bringing anything to the table in terms of stamina DPS, because it's just too weak. It's not comparable to Steel Tornado. It does less damage, no execute, less AoE, etc., etc., etc. But our other morph is called Sap Essence, and this is going to be a phenomenal morph. I'm going to take this one because it adds a little bit of flavor to it. So it's going to retain all of the original scaling stuff, but furthermore, whenever you utilize this skill, you don't even have to hit an enemy, but it's also going to heal you. And we see that healing will also heal for 20% based on how many enemies we hit. So each enemy we hit, we get a 20% bonus modifier for the heal. This has a cap of 6. So after 6 targets, it stops getting bonus healing, but that means we get 120% bonus healing out of this skill, over doubling, giving more than double that the listed tooltip gives. That tooltip is going to scale with all the same stuff: Magicka, spell damage, spell crit, etc. In the CP system, it is going to scale with Elfborn because that can crit. It's not based on how much damage it does, because again, you don't need to be dealing damage. It will use Bless because it's healing done, and it will also use Quick Recovery on yourself or if allies have that. So it's a great way to get some extra healing. It allows the Magicka Nightblade, Tank Nightblade, and Healer Nightblade to give more damage to the group as well as healing. We see whenever I sap in, I get a little bit of heal. Even though I'm not hitting anything, I'm getting healed. When I come in, it heals me for even more because I get that 20% bonus modifier. So it's a great way to bring some healing to the table. Furthermore, it'll also grant major brutality and sorcery, increasing our weapon and spell damage for 20%. So Sap Essence brings a lot to the table. It has healing, it scales, it has major sorcery. It's phenomenal. And since there are no really strong magical AoE spammables in the game, Impulse is 6 meters, it costs the same amount but does less damage. It's kind of but Sap Essence is great. Healing, damage, AoE, wonderful, and it procs that transfer passive every 2 seconds, gives us that flat healing. So yeah, Sap Essence is great. I use it on my Tank Nightblade, the Bloodletter. I use it on my healer as I DPS and my DPS. So it's a great skill. It brings a lot to the table compared to Power Extract. Yeah. But now let's talk about our final ability, and that is our ultimate, Soul Shred. Soul Shred is a pretty interesting ultimate. It's not going to wow any crowds in terms of DPS and PvE, but it helps your sustain or your survivability tremendously. I love this skill. I suggest it to most players who are learning Nightblades in general. Maelstrom Arena, Overland content, doing dungeons solo or in a group that you're not comfortable with, this skill is great with one of our morph options. But at base morph, we see it's an instant cast. It is an AoE ability, so it has a 6 meters AoE radius, and it only costs 150 ultimate. So it's not going to be anything crazy, but it's not going to be extremely cheap either. I do think that this could use a slight ultimate cost, maybe 120 ultimate cost instead of 150, but whatever. It deals magic damage, so it's always going to use spell penetration, but since it is an ultimate, it's going to use your max stats, whatever are highest. So if your stamina is higher, stamina, weapon damage, weapon critical. If your magicka is higher, magicka, spell damage, and spell critical. So does that have that dynamic scaling, but again, magic damage means that it is set in what it scales within CP, so it'll use Elemental Expert, Spell Erosion, and Elfborn all the time, and it'll scale with Master at Arms at base morph because it deals direct damage right away. So you just throw up in the air. I'll demonstrate with one of the morphs because the base morph looks a little bit more basic than one of our other morphs, which adds a little bit of more cool stuff to it. So instead of wasting skill points and times demonstrating, we'll just wait for that. But yeah, you just jump up in the air, you throw out your arms, 6 meters AoE radius, anything in there takes a big burst of magic damage, and they are stunned for 3.5 seconds. So it gives a little bit of breathing room for the Nightblade. It helps lock things in place. I love this on my Bloodletter build, my tank, for when I'm in groups who don't have the necessary power requirements to make utilization out of Warhorn. So when I need self-healing, I need DPS, and I need crowd control, this is a great way to get it with one of our morphs. So yeah, does a lot, and anytime we use this by an ally, one ally can activate the Soul Leech synergy, so they can activate it against the target we cast it upon, which will deal damage to that target. It's going to scale with whatever stats are highest because it is synergy. It's going to deal magic damage, so it's going to only use those CP nodes that we talked about, and it's going to heal them. So it's a great way for an ally to get a little big burst of healing, a big burst of healing. We see 7k, nothing to laugh at, about half of someone's health in a PvE situation. It can crit, it's going to scale with their stats. It's great. Now let's talk about our morphs. And our first morph is called Soul Siphon, and this is going to rework the morph. I'll actually take both morphs so that we can demonstrate. But Soul Siphon is really cool. So instead of dealing damage to targets, we're going to do the same animation. We're going to jump up in the air and throw out our arms 6 meters. It will now become 15 meters, so it's a super big AoE. It's going to last the same 3.5 seconds, but instead of dealing damage to enemies, it's going to heal our allies. So it's going to give a big burst of healing, 10.3k with really shitty stats. I'm not wearing armor, or I'm not wearing passives. I'm not wearing optimized CP, so it gives a lot. It's still going to scale with whatever stats are highest, so Stamina and Magical Nightblades can use this. It's going to have that big burst heal, and then it's going to have healing over time for those 3.5 seconds. Furthermore, when an ally is afflicted with this, or ourselves, up to 6, it has a 6-person AoE cap, you and your allies will receive Major Vitality, making them take 30% increased healing for 4 seconds. So not only is this tooltip pretty high alone in unoptimal gear, not proper CP, yada yada, no buff food, I'm also going to get a 30% multiplier on that alone, and that's going to stack with Soul Siphoner. It's going to stack with CP, so you're going to be able to heal like fucking nuts during this duration, but it is healing received, so it's not your healing done, but since you're healing your allies, or your allies are afflicted with this, they'll also get that 30% bonus modifier. So it's a great way to help survive those really sticky situations, but again, only can hit up to 6 allies, and it's only going to last 3.5 seconds. So it's not going to be something where you need a really long-winded duration, where it's like, we're going to be taking a lot of damage. Instead, you're going to want to use Veil of Blades or something. But if you need burst healing and you need it now, Soul Siphon is great. Again, I could just demonstrate the skill. I jump up in the air, I throw out my arms, and I heal like fucking nuts. We see tons and tons of healing. I think that was about 10 heal ticks over those 3.5 seconds, plus that big burst heal. So you're going to get a shit ton of healing. It is a wonderful ultimate that gives the healer Nightblade, the tank Nightblade, and even damage Nightblades in PvP or PvE a lot of healing potential. Now, in terms of meta performance, not going to bring anything crazy to the table because there are better ways to get that healing. But again, in PvP, it can save you and your allies' life. I've seen this thing do a lot of stuff. Still, 3.5 seconds, there's a lot of better things that you could be doing. If you kill an opponent, you don't need to heal anyways, so it kind of retracts from that. But still, it's wonderful, it's different, it brings a little bit of uniqueness to the table, and it brings a lot when it's used properly. So there is that option there. But my personal favorite morph is called Soul Tether. And what this is going to do is it's going to retain that 6 meters AoE damage. It's not going to last the 3.5 seconds or 4.5 seconds. It's going to last a little bit longer. The stun is going to last relatively the same, but it's still going to deal damage. So it's going to scale with all the same stuff we talked about before, but it's also going to deal damage upon hit, and then it's also going to tether to an enemy and drain their life. That means it's going to deal damage, and it's going to heal you for that amount. So that heal will not crit. It's like funnel health. If the damage tick crits, then the heal will crit. It can't double crit. It's going to scale the same way that that funnel health did, so it's going to have the ability to use Elfborn or Blessed and Quick Recovery, but it can't crit. But if the damage crits from Elfborn, then that healing will get crit too. So it will have that duality where it stacks with Elemental Expert, Spell Erosion, all that great stuff, because it is based off of damage. Let's just build up some ultimate so we can demonstrate that. Keep in mind, since that does have that siphoning component to it where we're also draining their health, that will be damage over time because we're constantly leeching their life every 1 second for that 8 seconds. So it's going to deal damage to anything with a big burst hit. It's going to deal more damage than our base morph did, so it does have a little bit of added DPS potential to it. And then it's going to leech their life every 1 second for 8 seconds. So this can hit up to 6 enemies in terms of the life leech, but it will go well beyond 6 enemies in terms of total DPS. So the damage portion has a 60% target cap, but the healing portion, or the tether, only can affect up to 6 targets. But I'll demonstrate in just a bit. It's a really fun ultimate. I love this on my Nightblade in PvE. Even on stamina DPS, I use this in dungeons when I'm in a sticky situation, or I'm soloing, or I'm in overland content. When I was new to Maelstrom, I used this because it does damage, it has healing. I love this skill. It's especially great on my Bloodletter build when you're running with unorganized groups. But we're going to demonstrate. I throw up in the air, shoot out my arms, and I heal every 1 second. And it's still lasting even through CC breaks, so it's a great way to get tons and tons of healing. I love, love, love this skill. I can't speak highly enough of it. Still, it's not meta, but it still has tons of utilizations in the game. So it's just a really cool show point that even though it's not meta, it still has use. It's not useless. It's not something that I can sit here and degrade, because I can't. It's done a lot for me. It's a wonderful skill, and I would never want to see it change because it's just really, really cool. And it's nice to be able to use something that's not necessarily meta. In PvP, it is extremely meta in many situations, especially for bomb builds or something, because it's very, very quick. You can come in and out of stealth with this skill. Boom, you can bomb people. However, Eye of the Storm has kind of taken over, but it still has that added healing potential to it. It does have that 4.5-second stun, so it's a really cool, unique, fun ultimate that feels great to get off. But that has covered everything for siphoning. This was a little bit longer as well. I can feel it in my throat, and I did rant a lot in terms of what I'd like to see done, because I feel like siphoning was one of the coolest things for me and Nightblades. I saw this, I was like, ooh, this is going to be some dope-ass blood magic, and I was disappointed. So I kind of have some... not jealousy, I can't think of the proper word, but some bitterness towards the skill line, because I wanted it to be so much more, and I feel like it could. So hopefully this feedback gets to someone with the right power, and they can do something about it. Maybe not everything I suggested, but I would love to see some stuff happen to siphoning, mainly for stamina DPS and a few of these passives. But otherwise, it's a really solid skill line. It brings a lot to the table. It does help the Nightblade feel unique. We get a spammable, we get a dot, we get an AoE, we get resource management. We have some stuff here, but there is definitely a lot of stuff to improve on in terms of some of these morph options are kind of meh. Agony, stuff like that. So everything could always be better, right? And even if a class is doing well, I'm always going to give suggestions of like, hey, this would be really cool if we did that instead. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you've learned some stuff for your Nightblades, especially since we've updated it since my previous videos. Next, we're going to go into the Sorcerer class. I'm going to do a lot of homework on that. I have in the past, but I know a lot of things have changed, and it's probably the class that I know the least about in terms of meta application, so don't expect a lot of comments on personal experience, more so what I know from raid leading, talking with other groups, groups, watching videos, stuff like that. But in terms of how the class operates, I'm pretty comfortable with it, so you don't have to worry about getting bunk information. But again, these are really long-winded, very rich series, so if you ever see me make a mistake, you're curious, you're questionable, leave a comment, let me know. I'll get back to it. If I need to test, I'll test. If I already know the answer, I'll let you know. Or if I just misspoke, it happens a lot. I mean, you guys know, you can probably tell from the jump cuts, from me not editing stuff out. Talking is a little bit rough for me at times, so I make mistakes with this shit all the time. So if I misspoke, let me know. I'll try and remedy that as best as possible. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys around. Videos like this one are made possible by the amazing support from these phenomenal people. Between my life, the game, and everything in between, I'd never be able to do as much as I can without them. Thank you to everyone for the empowerment, regardless from financial or in-game support, constructive feedback, or simple encouragement. You are all amazing.